This is part 2 of the Tamiya Egress rebuild series. So here I'm just going to cover the shock rebuild. Relatively simple. I have most of the spare parts that I need to complete the rebuild for the whole chassis. I'm just waiting on the upper and lower decks to come in from pargustore.com. That may take a while because it comes from Korea and it has to go through customs. But once I have the chassis, then that's really the foundation of the build, and I can just, rip apart the whole thing and start fresh and put everything back together. So these are the high cap dampers, the original vintage dampers that come with the Tamiya Egress. Now, when I got this off of the chassis off of eBay, it came with some kind of springs in the rear. These may or may not be the stock springs. I'm not entirely sure. And then the springs in front were these really stiff cut springs. And so what I tried to do originally was to find a set of springs that might work in terms of having like a gold or off gold color, because the original Egress springs were sort of off gold. So I initially tried getting the Tamiya DF03 spring set, and it has black, silver, and gold springs, black being softest, gold being medium, silver being hardest. And I tried them out. They are a little bit long for the shock bodies for both the front and rear springs. Also, even the softest springs, the black ones, are actually quite stiff for this. I'm using right now low C 25 weight oil in the front and rear, and the soft springs here are too stiff for that. You may need to go up to, I don't know, maybe 40 weight or something. So you can try this out. If you're just going to make it a shelf queen, then okay, you can use these gold springs, but I wouldn't really use them for actually running the chassis because it'll just be too stiff. Okay, so what I did for the front springs is I just took some, I have plenty of spare springs from my various TA02 chassis, and those are about the right size to fit on the front springs. They're not off gold color, but that's okay. They seem to work just fine. A little bit on the stiff side, ever so slightly, but it's perfectly fine. Let's see. And then what else do I want to cover here? The caps here have these little balls inside them, okay? And they're supposed to be in the front and rear shocks. And I may have lost one of the caps because this ball fell out of one of the rear shock caps, but I think they are a 6mm ball. And one thing you can do is pick up the aluminum ball nuts. Tamiya makes these in red and blue. I also covered this in one of the my Avante tuning video, the part 1 video. This has a sort of flat side on one side, and then it's round on the other. So these should be able to mount without any issue into these shock caps here. And the flat side, you'll just mount that up against the shock tower. So that should be no big deal. It should work fine. So if you don't happen to have these metal balls here in yours, that's okay. You can just use these guys. One thing that's kind of interesting about these shocks, let me see if I can do this with one hand here. Probably can't, but there we go. Okay. So I'll take the spring out. If you look, let's see, at the bottom here, the seals and everything, the O-ring seals don't come in from the top. They actually come in from the bottom, and then there's a little, I think it's like a C-clip, and it just comes in and it closes off the bottom seal. So what you have to do is get maybe a set of tweezers or a small knife or something to hook into the C-clip and unclip it. But be very careful when you do that. I would recommend putting it into like a plastic bag or something. There are plenty of bags that come with spare parts and stuff, and just, stick it in here so that you have some place to contain the clip when it shoots out of the shock body, because it can go flying all over the place. I almost lost one of these clips because of that. But then you take it out, and it's just 2 O-rings. There are no, if I remember correctly, there are no washers or anything in between the O-rings. It's just 2 O-rings and then a bottom sort of cover piece, which is kind of like a washer, and that's it. So I had to completely rebuild these shocks because when I got them with the chassis, they had all this gunk in it, so I had to take it all apart, clean it up, get a Q-tip, clean out the inside shock body, take out the seals, take out the O-rings, clean out this side, put it all back together, and then rebuild it. Thankfully, the shock shafts and everything are in good condition, so I've had this oil in here for maybe a week or two, and I haven't seen any leakage coming out of the seals, so they are thankfully working just fine. The tops of the shock caps, these are not bleeder caps. They do have a bladder like pretty much any other Tamiya shock set. There's just a little rubber bladder that goes over the top, and that's basically what you would use to bleed off excess oil. I don't know if there are replacement bladders that you can use from other models, because these shock caps are kind of a large diameter shock cap. And if you go to, I think, TamiyaEgress.com, someone else did a very nice rebuild series on their Tamiya Egress, and they had some problems finding replacement shock bladders for theirs. So that could be an issue. They did point out a suitable replacement, so just check out that website and you could probably get that information. One thing I noticed after I rebuilt these is that Tamiya actually made a set of re-released high cap dampers for the Avante 2011 series, and I have those right here. Now, whether or not I'll actually use these, I don't know, but I figured I'd pick them up because they'd be certainly a nice collector's item. But one thing you'll notice, maybe hard to see here, the bottom shock seal is different. Instead of having a C-clip, like in the original high cap dampers, this has a little screw in it. So you put your, it's kind of like, in some sense, let's see, I don't know if I have them here, the associated version 2 shocks where you screw in the seal from the bottom. This is sort of the same thing, but the shape and the color and everything of the shock body is the same. And these look like the original off-gold springs, and you can see these are sort of brownish, so I can tell that these springs here that I got are probably not the original springs that came with the Egress. But these should be the right off-gold springs. This comes with a little, for the fronts, a carbon fiber shock tower that you would add to the front of the Avante 2011, because these shocks are a little longer than the stock shocks for the Avante. So, yeah, these are really nice. Maybe I'll use them, I don't know, but I at least wanted to pick them up so that I can have them. So I think that should cover it for the shock rebuild. Again, anytime you're working with vintage parts that are rare or hard to find, like these C-clips, in the shock body, maybe you can find replacements, not a big deal, but do it in a bag or something so you don't lose all the parts. Okay, that's it for now. I hope that soon I'll be able to make part 3 of this rebuild series, involving more of, taking apart the chassis, cleaning it up, and, putting the gearboxes back together and everything. So we'll see. Thanks for watching.